Okay.
Alrighty, good morning, good evening, I guess good afternoon for us. I'm Can, I'm here with Lyngso, and I've got Tony to my right here for another wonderful DIY class. Today, we're gonna be talking about how to build stone walls. And it'll be a live class. It won't be a PowerPoint or anything. So follow along and feel free to just enter your questions via chat. And this class is being recorded, so you can watch it again under our community resources on lyngsogarden.com. And I will also send a link to the recording as well for the attendees. So you will have this as a reference later on. So Tony, the class is all yours. That was my intro, so welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Hello, everybody in America. Hello, everyone in Great Britain. Hello, everyone in Canada. Hello to everyone in Australia. Now, that being said, here's the international version of my workshop today, Sea Otter Training. Oh, wait a minute. No, we got calls from PETA. We weren't able to do that after all. Raised stone beds. Let's learn a few things about how to do this. Now pay attention, please, because there'll be a quiz at the end of the class, and that's the only hint I'm going to give you. And by the way, hi, Lori. Okay, moving right along. Let's build some walls and things. Now, yes, these aren't very big, but they get the message across. So just bear with me as I kind of work you through a couple of things. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty, unintended, of wall building in a moment. But before that, I want to talk with you about your landscape plan, the idea. Why are you doing this? What do you want to do? Who's it for? What's it going to cost? Should I do this myself, or should I hire Tony or someone else who's a professional at doing it? I want to help you through some of these things. I may violate the code and tell you some things that your contractor may never have bothered to share with you, but I'm willing to take that chance. The room is armored and they're not likely to kill me through these walls. So outside I'm in trouble, but right now we're good. Now, that having been said, first and foremost, no, I'm not wearing my mask. Yes, I know I'm supposed to be wearing my mask, but pretend that we're outdoors and get over it. Be safe about the COVID thing, wherever you live. Do what's advised for you to do to protect yourself and others. That's my only soapbox I'm going to stand on today, but it's very, very important. Now, that having been said, there are other things you can do about safety, and I want to cover those a little bit briefly because I don't want any of you to phone me or email me from the ER one day. Now, that having been said, proper attire is important. Notice I'm wearing very tough pants. I'm wearing a really crusty, crummy, icky-looking t-shirt, but it protects me from the dust and the dirt and the sun. If you're going to be working outdoors, most likely, please wear long sleeves and a hat and sunglasses or sunblock. Do what you must to protect yourself from the damaging rays of the sun. Even on a foggy or a cloudy day, you can and will get sunburned if you're not careful. Also, for those who are sensitive to the sun, that wear a big hat to protect oneself. Bear in mind that sunlight will reflect off of the ground and the stone, and you'll still get burned even if you're under a hat. So please be careful about that. Again, I don't want you to get hurt, just as much as I don't want myself to get hurt. That having been said, get yourself a pair of sturdy gloves. I buy these from Home Depot for approximately $3, and on a good week, they'll last me 1 week, but they keep my skin intact. I strongly recommend you do that as well. Don't go to the garden center and buy the cute, flowery cotton gloves. When they're comfortable, they will protect you for about 30 seconds, and they'll last for 3 times that long. Get good, sturdy leather gloves. Shoes. I'm wearing steel toe logger boots. These are contractor boots, big time. The steel toes, because these are not movie rocks. They're not made of styrofoam or foam rubber. They are heavy. I'm going to lift this one stone up here in a moment as we're building the wall that I'll show you. And that's a 50 or 60 pound stone easily. Imagine that falling on your toe. You'll be in the ER explaining to people how it was a dumb thing to do. Steel toes are very, very helpful. They're expensive. If you're only going to do this for one project and never do it again, I really strongly recommend go some good sturdy work boots. Do not wear sandals. Do not go barefoot. Do not wear slippers, even the cute fuzzy ones with animal heads on them. Don't do it. Do not wear flip-flops. Please wear something that's closed toe at the very, very minimum. You're going to get hurt if you don't do it. That having been said, I've covered the safety equipment. Safety goggles or glasses are a very good idea. I forgot mine. And secondarily, my eyeglasses, shatter-resistant lenses. So far, I've managed this for over 40 years with no trips to the ER for my eyes. So I'm hopeful that you're not going to experience my inadvertent dumbness in not using safety glasses, but please protect your eyes. Okay, moving right along. Why don't we do some stone stuff, including stone tools? That all will hurt you if you're not careful, so operate them safely, of course. Not all these are getting used today, but these are the kinds of things you're going to need. I'm saving the ones that I use the absolute most for the very last. But that having been said, you might need a level depending on the nature of your project and its scope. This is a 3-foot level. I've got a short one in my pocket that I generally always have, except when swimming or bathing, really. TMI, sorry. Moving right along, they will come in very handy. Working with many types of stone, the stones are so irregular that you're not going to be able to take a level and put it on top, and it's perfect all the way across. What I would tend to do generally is I average over the tops of the highest stones and kind of just visualize and guess that in general, you're going in a quasi-level direction. You're never going to get it up. Well, you can get it absolutely perfect, but that's a ridiculous amount of extra labor, and I don't advise that you do that. I hope you're paying attention because I talk fast. So play it back in slow motion later, and I can talk like this. But meanwhile, this is an electric grinder. I don't know metrics so well. There's a 4-inch grinder, so it's a 100 millimeter plus or minus. Very handy tool to have. There are numerous times when that will come in very handy for cleaning off an edge of a stone, especially the irregular stones. There could be a bump that just happens to hit the high spot on the stone you're trying to make them together with, and you've got to get something down lower. I use my mason's hammer, which I'll show you in a few minutes, but this is a good way to cheat. Grinders of all sorts will have a guard, plastic or metal, that covers part of the blade to protect you. Yes, I have cheated and removed my guard. And many professionals in the industry also do the same thing because it makes this tool much more usable and easier to use, but inherently more dangerous. So I don't advise you take off the guards, but a lot of us cheat and we do that. So you've been warned, don't you do this at home. I'm a trained professional, but this tool gets used a lot. So you really should get one. Here at Home Depot, it's probably $90, $120, something like that. You'll need various brushes to clean things. This is a good stiff bristled, but soft bristled brush. It's not wire, but plastic, so it won't scratch up stone. Here's a wire brush, which can scratch up stone depending on the stone you're working with, but it helps you remove heavy, encrustation of stuff, dirt, lichen, moss, anything you can imagine that's less than what you want to have on there. It's a good idea to have one. This is a fairly fine bristled, it's like a mini broom. You can actually use a broom. Once you're done with everything, you want to get the dust off. I generally sweep off the worst of the dust first. At the end of the job, usually washing off with a garden hose or some sorts of clean water is what's done, but I like to do both. And the really flexible bristles can get into the nooks and crannies a little bit better, but they're all very handy to have. This is an essential stoneworking tool. If you plan on doing stonework yourself, first of all, make sure there's no grease or mud on them. This is a 1 1/4 inch wide chisel. I oftentimes will use an 1.5 inch wide chisel for splitting stones, chipping off the edges of stones. Depending on the stone, there are times where you may need to get a bit of a notch and you don't have your grinder, or you're unable to use it at that moment for whatever reason. The chisel comes in very, very handy. You'll notice on mine, or you may not, but the top of it is kind of mushroomed out a bit because I've had it for many, many years, and that's what happens when you keep hitting them with hammers for years on end. But brand new, it won't look like that. It'll be just square and perfect. It's not going to hurt it to mush it out. It's perfectly fine. The blade end of the chisel, mine is really rounded off. And again, you probably can't see that. When they're brand new, they're very sharp and very nice, and it almost looks like you can cut glass with it or whatever. No, don't use a chisel on glass. The point just being it gets rounded off with age. Don't bother with a grinder trying to keep it sharp edged. The minute you hit stone with it, it's trying to make it round anyway, and round actually works better in the world of stonemasonry. I've never ground my chisel to a point, and I'm never going to need to. But you're going to need that tool as well. I call this a baby sledgehammer, but the reality is that's not the terminology for it. But you notice I like the one with the wedge shape on one end and the conventional hammer face on the other end. If you only have the hammer face on both sides, it's not the end of the world. I don't very often use this end, but once in a great while, a particular job with a particular stone is called for, so it's quite handy to have. This thing weighs about 8 pounds, give or take. I don't even know kilograms again, 2.2, 16, 18, no, kilograms 2.2. See, I told you, I don't do metrics so well. I'd say get one of these. I'd say get the chisel. You probably have the brush kind of stuff laying around that you could use. If you're gonna do a lot of stonework, I would get the grinder, perhaps an extension cord you may need. Level, you should already have something like that, but these are must-have tools. Good shovel or two, a round point shovel and a flat shovel are very, very handy. A rake can come in handy. A kitchen style broom, not necessarily a push broom, would be more versatile to use in your project. But after you're all done, there may be a mess all over the adjacent patio or something, in which case a push broom could be handy as well. But that's all the tools you really need. Beyond that, you need a certain degree of, I'd say, fearlessness. Don't be intimidated by attacking a project such as this nature. You need a strong back. You need to know how to lift properly. Do not bend over and use your back to lift things. You've got to use your legs to do the lifting. Otherwise, you will be in the ER and you'll be emailing me saying, why didn't you warn me more about my back? I'm warning you. Pay attention. No, I have not hurt my back, and I still have a good back, despite the fact, yes, I'm older now, and my back feels it more than it did before, but I've not been stupid and I've managed to keep myself sick. So don't be stupid, or at least don't do dumb things, because they will hurt you. Accidents are unforgiving. They won't give you a do-over to get it right the second time if you're already hurting from having hurt yourself. So just don't. A couple of things to consider going into a stone project of any sort, whether it's a patio or a wall, or something cool like stairs or a sculpture or something gravity defying or all the really cool fun stuff. I teach another course about landscape design, and I have the 5 W's: who, what, where, why, when. And you need to have answers to those questions before you begin purchasing materials or having trucks arrive and dump all kinds of things in your driveway. The who, who's it for? The what are you trying to do here? I'm trying to create a patio. I'm trying to create raised beds. The where, what part of your property are you considering doing it on? The why, well, why are you doing it? So I have something nice to look out the window at. So when I'm sitting in a Chase lounge on my patio, looking out at that beautiful wall, I can live my Corona commercial with the Corona beer on the little stand next to you and a fake palm tree behind you. But the who, what, where, the why, who's it for? It's for me to do gardening. It's for the children to climb on. It's a place for my dog to sit up on top of the stones because he loves to be the master of what he surveys. There could be any number of reasons, but all these design questions determine and dictate to a degree the manner in which your project should be approached. You could, and I recommend, of course, because I am one, engage the services of a landscape designer, a landscape architect, a landscape contractor, or someone who's a combination of those various things. I am a landscape designer, a LEED certified landscape designer, and a licensed landscape contractor. And many of you, I probably run across some of you, I'm certain, for 22 years consecutively, I created show gardens in San Francisco Flower and Garden Show. And I learned a tremendous amount in that show. And I taught a tremendous amount to people about what to do and what not to do, and things to do from the design stage. And again, that's why my course starts with the design and the math and the logistics behind a project. Frankly, creating a project that's beautiful is relatively easy, but creating any kind of a project, whether a professional is doing it or whether you're doing it yourself, creating a project that does not end up in a catastrophe of some part, that's the most important thing and the hardest part. At the garden show, we had 25,000 people walking through in a week, and my gardens were walk-through gardens. I had people with glasses of wine in their hands and cameras walking through my gardens every 2 feet off of the actual floor where I built it. Have to think about how do you keep people from hurting themselves. Same thing in your garden. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want your pet to fall and break its leg. You certainly don't want your children to get hurt. And you don't want your drunken guests, if you have wild parties, hurting themselves. Stuff to consider. None of that has to do with how pretty your yard's going to look when it's done. The beautiful part really is the easy part. So we're going to talk about the beautiful part a lot, but I wanted to let you know that the preparation is key and putting a great deal of thought into this. These stones are heavy. A pallet of average stone, no matter what kind of stone, can weigh in the neighborhood of two tons. That's 4,000 pounds or kilograms if you are all capable of converting that at this moment in time. But that's a great deal of weight. And returning stones is not always possible or simple. Every stone seller has policies pertaining to returns. if you bought too much, for example. And they'll help to guide you initially in ordering the proper amounts, but you have to be careful, including the Lyngso here. And I've been a loyal Lyngso client since day one of my career back in 1979. And ask them about return policies, ask them to assist you with the quantities that you'll need to order for your project, whether it's at Lyngso or some other place that sells stone and boulders and topsoil and amendments and so on. They're there to be helpful, and they can be a vast resource for you so that you may not have to do quite as much of the math. I'm a control freak a little bit. I do my own math. I don't think it's a bad thing, but either way, this project doesn't have to be intimidating or a real pain for you. It could still possibly be expensive depending on how you define expensive. Certainly labor is always your number one cost, and hiring it out to be done will cost you a lot more. Thus, do-it-yourself projects. I'm going to teach you. I promises, Tony. Let's get with it. I know. Oh, let's see. What have I got here? A grasshopper walks into a bar. The bartender says, "Hey, we have a drink named after you." The grasshopper says, "What, Irving? I didn't warn you. I will throw out a walks into a bar joke once in a while, and I ask that you pay attention because I think they're funny. Also, I have to entertain myself in projects because I'm usually out in the backyard of someone's home working all by myself. So I think I'm funny. Just no applause, just throw money. Okay, that having been said, let's actually do a little bit of stone stuff. And by the way, Ken is monitoring the phone lines right now. And if you place your order in the next 10 minutes, I promise we'll double your order. So keep calling. Also, if you have questions, write a question on in. I've already told Ken, interrupt me. I love being interrupted, especially with good questions. So people, help me out and give me some good questions as we go.
Well, Tony, we have our first question.
Thank you.
And attendees want to know if you're actually going to build something today.
Yeah, Tony talks a lot, but yes, I just wanted to enter the whole question thing, and I was going to start walking you through from this direction to the other direction. I've got my finished wall. My wall is 90% complete. Another one that I've got a little more work to do. But I started out with the easiest wall to set, one that's less easy to set, and one that's a more challenging one. And we're going to do all of these today. It's going to take me less time to build them than it would for the length of this class, I think. So questions will be very handy. So I don't give single word answers. I give essay question answers. But to that question, I say yes. We're going to start doing that right now. So let me show you the first type of stone. Now, in the world of stone and DIY for making raised beds, this is probably the easiest type of stone arrangement to do. This is actually Arizona sandstone. And these stones have been cut, as you can see, in rectangles and squares. And they come in different dimensions, either square or rectangular. These are the smaller ones. The second row down is 12 inch by 12 inch. These are 12 inch by 18 inch. So needless to say, I have a 3 foot long section here just so you can get the idea of what we're talking about. And I've alternated layers. Part of it's structural. You don't ever want to have all the joints lined up on top of each other. And part of it was artistic. The main thing for me was, this is only a 2-hour class, so I picked the easiest, fastest stuff to use. But these are the easiest for you to get and build by yourself. They just stack up. However, they don't always come in uniform thickness. So when you're building the wall, it can be really spectacular to see a wall with stones of different thicknesses randomly throughout. But for the purpose of speed, that's a long way of doing it. So I cheated and didn't do that here. But measure or be mindful of the fact that they're not always the same thickness. And that will either help you or be a disastrous project for you if you didn't consider that when you're looking at and or ordering and purchasing your stones. Super easy to lift up. You pick them up, you plop them down on top of each other. Now, sometimes all the time in the world of stone, these look pretty flat on their surfaces. And the Arizona sandstones tend to be fairly flat. Because it's a natural material, no, they're not perfectly flat. That having been said, sometimes, and I'm going to show you if this one wobbles, I don't know. But yeah, this one's kind of wobbling. And again, this is theater, not landscaping, so I cheated and didn't get it all stable. But the wobble factor can be compensated for in various ways. One of the ways is you take chips of the actual stone and use them as wedges to get everything to stay put. In fact, I'll show you when I get to the other type of stone, the other end. The garbage pieces, the little fragments, the chips, the wafer thin slices are like gold. They are worth more to you than the big pieces are to use as shims. Sometimes you just, there have been, on the other stones further down, you'll see there are gaps sometimes where the regular stone plus a regular stone creates this hole that you don't want it to look like a hole. You need to find a smaller piece to put in there too. Keep all of your garbage pieces. Don't throw them away until the end of the job. Anyway, if you were building this wall to be permanent, let's say a raised planter or a seat wall, these are all just stacked on top of each other. Nothing's holding them to gravity and friction. For a wall of this type of material, you could mortar the stones together, but I suggest making your life simpler and gluing the rocks together. There are adhesive products now designed specifically for gluing brick and concrete and stone. It's permanent, it's water resistant, it lasts forever, et cetera, et cetera. And you literally put a few beads of the material on there, plop the stone down, wiggle it around, and then you take, pardon me for a moment. I thought I wouldn't need this yet. Another tool bag. This is called a dead blow hammer. It looks like it's rubber and basically just kind of a very rubbery material. It's filled with several pounds of lead shot inside, so it's hollow in there. And if you were to hold one and shake it, you can hear it going rustle, rustle, and it's shaking around. What happens is, because it's rubbery, you hit the surface of the stone, it doesn't immediately destroy the stone like a steel hammer would do. And the lead inside is a physics thing. The inertia of the lead moving forward in the front of the hammer creates greater force than just what the hammer alone in your arm would create. So it produces a very strong blow that's less likely to harm or damage the stone. And if you had put the adhesive product in here, it comes in a tube like for a caulking gun. You can get that at Home Depot, at Lyngso, you can get it any place that sells construction materials, probably will have it for you. You literally go through and you do this, and it settles everything down. When you have the adhesive product in there, if you just hit it with a hammer, I have seen that sometimes the pieces shift around and slide while you're hitting it. But before the material dries, and it takes some time to dry, I would wiggle it back or use a hammer to get it aimed the way that you wanted it, because it can shift around when you're hammering on it. I learned the hard way about that, trust me. And I would do that throughout. I would do that on every layer. If you really want stability and permanence, the reality is you could cheat if you're not getting taller than maybe 2 feet tall. And this is 18 inches from the top of this wall to the floor. So another 6 inches or so. That high of a wall, I would say you could glue the top 3 courses maybe, or maybe even 4, and not have to do the others, but still use the shims and things to keep it all non-wobbly. And it would last and endure forever. The top ones I would layer because they could get sat upon, they could get bumped into by somebody's butt, wheelbarrow, children run bicycles into things, God knows what, but that helps you make a wall that will tolerate daily use, rather than having loose stones that are going to shift around all the time, or potentially be hazardous. Especially if you have wobbly stones like this, and someone was sitting here in a bathing suit, for example, or something, and that shifts, that could produce an owie if you get pinched in the stone. It's better to have things stable and not moving. So that's the easy one. Yes, it will take you hours to do. And every stone has an ugly side and a good looking side, and the edge is the same thing. Now you can get these pre-cut stones with smooth edges that were cut by a saw. You can also get them with the natural edge like this, especially for the Arizona sandstone. And my understanding of it is they're like giant guillotines at the rock quarries that make that, and it works. So that's the easy wall. I would recommend doing it. Plus it's nice, it has a uniform, nice flat surface. You can use that to sit on if you were gardening. You could use that as extra seating if you were entertaining, and you can put beverages or whatever. Stain resistance and stain protection and sealing is not something I really want to get into. However, the Arizona is a porous stone. Very good idea to seal it regularly. And by that, I mean, I would do it once a year, and that will minimize the problems you would have from potential spillage or staining from anything really. But you have to be diligent about that, because Arizona does tend to soak up stains readily otherwise. So that having been said, yeah, let's move on to the next type of stone. This is an end view of this particular wall, and you can see how I don't have the joints. I really try very, very hard not to have them directly lined up. Now I know that one's pretty close, got me some slack. But you get the general idea. You'll notice that I tended on this particular wall, because it's only a foot wide, to have where I do have a wider stone and a narrower stone. I have the narrower ones in here. it's not exactly cheating, it was taking the lazy way, because a narrower stone out of the edge here for a dry stack wall that does not have mortar or adhesive, they can tend to work themselves out loose and fall out and create problems. So just for today, I did put it that way. Out in the real world, if we were mortaring the stone together or gluing it together, I would have actually preferred to have had some of the smaller pieces out here with the larger part back, so things look more random or a little less contrived maybe. And that's back to the aesthetic or the design of things. Depends on what you want. If you like uniformity, then you could easily do stones that are full width, and then the next stone, they're half stones, kind of like what I did here. That technique is equally valid. Just for purposes of this workshop, I didn't do it that way. Now, this is a type of flagstone that customarily you hear flagstone and you think patios, pathways, etc. Yep, same stone. Comes on a pallet. They're usually great big pieces. Depending on the type of stone, you may get a pallet with great big pieces and smaller or medium-sized pieces as well. And that's what I did. Just took great big pieces and turned them down into smaller ones. When you're shopping for stone, especially random stone, not stones that have been deliberately cut, I would look long and hard at each pallet of stone that you have to pick from and look all the way around and look at what the stone's dimensions appear to be. Not only looking at their dimensions, but look to see if they have, if you like relatively straight edges, for example, as opposed to edges that are wild and crazy and go all over the place. Most stone projects and most of my clients, including myself, like to have an edge that's reasonably uniform and predictable rather than wildly crazy. But it really depends on the look of what you're trying to create. If you like wild and crazy, that's great, because if you have a piece of stone that's just disastrous, if you're looking for a straight edge, it's probably got exactly what you're looking for. But the bottom line is no pallets of stone are created equal. And I've seen batches of stone, even here at Lyngso, where I go through 10 pallets and none of them are the edges are the way I want them. And lo and behold, the final 2 pallets I needed happened to have what I needed. Thank goodness I looked rather than just picking the 2 at the front of the pile. It's important that you do that. It's the preparation and the success is in the details sometimes, and little things like that are important. Measuring the thickness of the stones in the pallet. A pallet of flagstone, for example, doesn't look very sexy sitting there all palletized, stacked on top of each other. Sometimes they will come on stacked vertically on their edges rather than flat. Depends on the stone largely. But measure how thick the stones are. For patios and things, you can get away with stones that vary in thickness, but for walls, it becomes a little bit more effort to try to find stones that have thicknesses that will work for you. I deliberately went and hand-picked these stones from their yard, so they're all uniform in thickness, so again, I cheated. But it also makes my life easier here and now. And if you have the ability to pick your stones, pick them all the same thickness, or pick enough stones to make some of the rows one thickness, and the next row could be a different thickness. Again, details to work out, some of it through the College of Hard Knocks, but that's just the way that it goes. A horse walks into a bar. The bartender says, "Why the long face?" It's a horse, he has a long face, for God's sake. Okay, anyway. Okay, I've got the top 2 pieces, which I cheated and already pre-fitted before. I pulled them off to show you what does this thing look like on the inside, this particular wall. So pardon me while I teach you everything left-handed now, even though I'm not ambidextrous. But look at this wall up here. The part that you see is the most important part as far as fit and finish is concerned. As far as skill, it requires just as much skill or effort to get the inside, the hidden side done properly than it does the front. But again, because this is theater, not landscaping, in the garden show, when you saw that beautiful 10-foot tall stone wall or whatever, it was god-awful ugly and holy in the back with pieces missing and propped up with 2x4s and cinder blocks because it was temporary. In a real garden, that would not be the case. And in a real garden, we would have dirt behind here. And I've got dirt behind the Napa wall, rock wall, the last one, the hardest one that I'm going to show you. But imagine that there was dirt behind here. These big openings back here would not be openings. The dirt would be brought in. Oftentimes, you'll also have garbage pieces and oops pieces. And garbage, again, that's your goal. You put the garbage in the back and stack things up and fill in the joints in between. To even like stone walls, hundreds and hundreds of years ago in England, for example, even the interiors of the big thick walls oftentimes were all the little garbage pieces and gravel and grit and sand and whatever, but the stones were on the outside. and it still does make it a cohesive, strong wall structurally, even though it looks like it's all the crap and all the garbage that you put in the middle. Well, that's because it is the crap and the garbage. Anyway, so I'm not gonna build all that up properly for you at the moment, but you get the idea of stacking miscellaneous pieces on top of one another, so that when the piece ends up on the top here, it's not teeter-tottering with nothing underneath it and or behind. And you would fill it inside here. I generally would use the stone, the soil that you've got. Partly depends on what kind of soil do you have or are you bringing in to use, but in general, the soil will work. One can also cheat, again cheating, and use sand, and sand will fill in very nicely, especially in the narrower joints. And generally speaking, you're going to have a more solid, cohesive unit again if all of this is brought up and filled up, and all the ridiculous joints that are in between, even if they look large, are filled with a sand or a soil product that will actually fit down in there. It helps to make everything much more solid and much more stable. And this is how it's done. You can mortar these stones in place, bearing in mind that a wall such as this look right now with the dry stacked look. I'll explain to you what the heck is this anyway, besides a throw rug, because it's more than just that. You have tight joints, generally speaking, and you don't have grout lines. If you're to build a wall with mortar, adhering the stones together from row to row and stabilizing it, certainly all these gaps in the middle, you don't use sand anymore, you would use mortar and chunks of garbage stone to fill them. But in the front, you're going to have, like this one, for example, picture it up like this, and there'd be a grout joint in between. That's an aesthetic thing. Structurally, it's not a right or wrong that you use mortar or not, but the look will be different. If you like this type of a look, I'm back to gluing the stones together again, like we talked about previously with the Arizona. Now, there's a company, a brand called Paper Bond that's been around forever, and they were one of the earlier companies to produce the glue product, but so many companies have their own versions. And in my opinion, they're all fairly similar. However, some of them, when I'm caulking, it's like caulking material. When it dries and hardens, some of those materials dry to actually being absolutely hard and solid, and others are more about, they're like made of polymers or elastomeric compounds that when dry are still slightly flexible. I highly advise using the type of product that when it's dry is slightly flexible, I should say. The main reason for that is expansion and contraction. I don't know where you live, but if it's cold in the wintertime and hot in the summertime, and things expand and contract. During the course of a day, it goes from warm to the daytime to chilly at night, same thing. And if you have a glue product that's absolutely frozen solid all the time, something has to give. And if the joint can't give, it could very well be that the stone could potentially give in some way, or just the bond to the stone, so that sure, the layer of that glue is still in there, but it's not glued to the stone anymore. The flexible ones help you keep it all together over the long haul. And I'm assuming, as do my clients when I build something for them, that it's an investment that's supposed to last a lifetime or through several generations at least, not last until the check that you give me clears and then it falls apart. So longevity is something to consider in the means that you choose to put your wall together with. You can totally do it dry stack with nothing, just gravity and friction holding it together. And then like we talked about the wobble factor. Yes, some of these wobble because for the seminar, again, I took the lazy road out, but don't do that at home. If you're gonna do it yourself, you want every layer to not be wobbly and shifting. And then it's a matter of finding chips and little pieces. You will have all kinds of them to use.
Tony, we have a question here. So,
I love questions. Come on, bring it on.
If you wanted something more uniform and an awful lot cheaper, could you dress the edges of broken paving slabs?
The answer, this is a first for me. I'll give you a one-word answer. Yes. There are techniques for doing that, whether it's like broken concrete sidewalks or your old driveway. There have been circumstances where I pulled up patios that were like concrete paver stones, like inexpensive ones that were 12 inch by 12 inch or whatever, and they've been laid out as a patio. And the owner wanted to recycle those products, but not have the edges look like they had been molded in a mold. So the pieces were broken, and then you have a rough edge to it, even though it's concrete. So yeah, that can totally be done. And in fact, that can save you bucks if you're pulling up an old patio or something and can reuse the concrete. The setting of it, the techniques are similar for setting up a material or setting a material like that and this, but the logistics can be complicated. The concrete may vary in thickness wildly, depending partly how old your patio is. I've seen some patios put in by old timers that in places the concrete was a foot thick In other places, it was 2 inches. And it's just all over the place. Also, most old patios have the top of the concrete was floated nice and reasonably uniform and smooth. The edges may have been wonderful where the forms were, but the undersides, maybe they didn't have base rock underneath or the ground was raked uniformly. So it was all over the place and the concrete the bottoms could be weird. You're going to use an awful lot of chisel. Okay, make notes. This is a new tool. I think this is the last tool introduction I have for you, but I'm good at introductions. Tools meet everyone, tool. This is called a mason's hammer or a brick mason's hammer. Everybody should have one of these. This is the most used tool I have ever used in my life, is this hammer. It's a hammer, it's a chisel. It's great for packing down dirt and tucking things in. You can dig holes in plants with it. Look, it's a back scratcher. This thing is great, let me tell you. You want one of these for sure. They come in different weights. I get the heaviest one. This is about a 24 ounce. I think you can get them in 20 ounces and blah, blah, blah. But the heavier is the better. It's a good arm workout. When you're hammering, don't hammer in front of your face. Hammer to the side. Picture this, contacting this. These things happen. Talk to ER doctors. But I don't want this to happen to you. Because I've never done it. I've been fortunate to know better. But things happen. You have to be careful about that stuff. But this is great for building. I use this and the dead blow hammer that I lost about in front of me. These are the only two tools I've used for all of this, except for the shovel for shoveling the dirt. You don't even need these other ones for this right now. But yeah, recycled concrete, great idea. There's a sexy term that's been coined for it called urbanite. So it's used concrete being repurposed, urbanite. So you can impress your friends by telling them that wall is made with urbanite. And you can tell them that it was imported from New Zealand if you're in New Zealand or wherever. And you spared no expense in bringing that project to them. Concrete's easier to break with a chisel and cut and whatnot than stone. Yeah, it's hard as concrete, but it's easier to work with because it's really Portland cement and sand and gravel. That's all kind of been glued together by itself. So that's an easy product to work with, but it's heavy and a pain in the neck and filthy dirty. I'd recommend wearing a mask, otherwise you're going to be breathing all that dust in too. But that's what I've got to say about that. So the tricks of the trade of cheating on the walls, it can be ugly on the backside. It doesn't have to be uniform and tight, unless the stones happen to just work out that way. On this wall, it doesn't show it too much, but even some of these, the stones underneath are sticking way out into where the dirt's going to be, and that's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. This type of stone, if you take a big piece and hammer on it with a hammer to break it into smaller pieces, sometimes no matter how much you try to hit it in the middle to get 2 medium-sized pieces, it will break and give you 11 smaller pieces when it started out really big. And on that one back there, I was hesitant to hit it to make it smaller, just to do that and risk destroying that stone that looked great on the front. So the back of the wall doesn't matter what it looks like, really. It's going to be ugly. Let it be ugly. Don't waste your time and effort on dealing with really trying to pretty it up. And if you really are type A and have to have it uniform on the back, I would say on the backs then cheat and cut the stones with a saw. Now cutting the stones with a saw can and will, I have a stone somewhere that has it. These are natural edges. At the quarry, I don't know if they were chiseled or just naturally broke themselves in that way, but or cut on a guillotine perhaps even. I really don't know how they're quarried. But saw cutting a stone will produce a very flat, very uniform, smooth feeling, could almost feel shiny surface that if I had stuck one of those pieces in here with the saw inside facing out, you would so know it. It would stand out like a sore thumb and look like a really amateur job, unless you were on purpose trying to make a design statement. But on the backside, again, it doesn't matter if it's ugly. Save yourself the headache and do whatever is quickest and easiest and hopefully cheapest for you. But the saw thing. The grinder has a diamond blade on it. I neglected to mention the diamond blade. There are abrasive blades, carborundum, I think is a material they're made of. Don't waste your time and don't waste your money. Get a diamond blade. They cost a little bit more, but they have longer lifespans and are the way to go. You can also get, if you're planning on cutting a lot of stone or thicker stones, a circular saw or a more heavy-duty circular saw called a worm drive saw that generally have 7-inch diameter blades on them. And they make diamond blades for those saws as well. And they will make short order of cutting through most stones. They lack the finesse that a handheld grinder can give you for really doing finer work or just cutting a line through a big stone. Yeah, you can use a saw for sure. consider that the saw blade is disposable. After you kill it off and wear it out from cutting the stone, it's just a paperweight, recycle the steel or throw it away. Consider the saw a sacrificial saw, because it'll start sucking in all the dust and grit that you cut off of the stones. And sure, it'll live for a long time, but I buy my stones solely for the purpose of my saws only for using for stone. And if I'm lucky, I get a year's worth of use out of it before it just dies or catches fire and I have to throw it away. Seriously, I've had saws do that. The electronics get all messed up with all that dust and abrasives. But it's a great thing to have, and it's worth the price just to make your life easier, but you're not going to be able to save it or use it as your fine carpentry saw later on. I wouldn't even try. These stones are heavy again, but for the purposes of what we're doing now, I am going to put the top leak piece on. I'm not going to fill it all up and get it all solid, because I hope and trust that you understand what I was talking about. And it's a waste of my time to show you how to shovel dirt behind a wall. However, when we get to the last wall, I will show you what to do with the dirt when you have a wall that's interfacing with dirt. So again, theater, not landscaping here. But I will show you what do you do and how do you do it, Tony? Because the who, where, and why, whatever, you already decided for yourselves. I'm going to put my back to you. I apologize, but this is heavy and I don't want to have to reach over the wall from behind. This is 40 pounds, maybe 45. So it's a doable thing. Okay, I cheated. I had this chunk in there because it was wobbly. And yesterday, in fact, I put that in there to make it less wobbly. Wow, it almost looks like it was made for it. Well, yes, because Tony made it for it. You see, I've got this big time wobble in here. A lot of times when you have a wobble, two schools of thought: fix it by making it all the way to one end and totally fixing the other end. But then what oftentimes happens is your joint will look, wow, that looks pretty good. And over here you go, good Lord, there's a giant hole over there. I tend to try to split the two openings well, split them into two, basically. But if I got this, for example, and I've got that chip under there, it's got far less wobble than it had. And, it bugs me having that size of a joint, but I'm just too lazy today to take out this piece and find a thicker piece, but you can play it that way. The palette's going to have stones of variable thicknesses, and even the great big fat thick ones, hang on to them, and the ones that are too thin, oh, that'll never work, you never know. Another thing, like filling in this little piece in here, for example, I just took a random piece and I did not saw cut the edges. But if you're only going to see this part, there's no rule that says you can't saw cut everything else. You get it to fit that hole perfectly. I wasn't allowed to use a saw in here for obvious reasons, so I had to do everything with the hammer and chisel. But it got the job done.
Tony, question. So when you start one of these walls, the foundation of the wall, do you do multiple pieces or one long piece, or can you start explaining about how to build the foundation there?
I'm very happy that all of you are paying attention, and secondarily, or most importantly, that you're asking good questions. Yes, what goes under the wall, I just haven't bothered to get around to talking to you about yet, and that was out of order, so my bad. But yes, pertaining to what goes underneath and how do you start that first row. For this type of an installation, the types of stones that you would generally want to use may be different than the one behind me, and we'll get into that in a moment on that one. For the base of a wall on the ground, I generally put 4 inches compacted of a material that's called base rock. Here in California, at least, base rock is made from recycled concrete. It's the crushed stone that they put into roadways. No matter what country you're in, when they put the roads down, they always put some type of a crushed stone product underneath, and base rock is a product that's used here. It's inexpensive compared to stone, et cetera, and it provides a stable base under your wall. I would put a very minimum of 4-inch thick compacted layer underneath wherever the stones are going to be. If you live on a site where your ground is below sea level and it's squishy wet all the time, or a horrible clay soil that in the wintertime it is just a lake of goo, you would want to put a thicker layer of base rock underneath, 6 to 8 inches, I would say. For the average yard, 4 inches is more than enough. Have I ever seen someone cheat and not put any? Of course, it happens all the time, but there's a greater potential for, if the ground were to shift or settle, that the whole wall is going to do that. Now, I liken the base rock installation technique to the same, similar to being painting your house. I don't care if you spent $100 on a gallon of that really fancy designer paint or $30 on a paint that was just decent. If you didn't sand and scrape and properly put primer and prep your house, your beautiful, expensive paint isn't going to make a difference if the prep wasn't proper underneath. Same thing for a wall, same thing for a patio in my workshops. I talk about using the base rock. I liken that to prepping your house. Sure, nobody wants to have to deal with scraping the paint and sanding the paint and doing all the things, but it shows if you don't do that, and it shortens the lifespan of your finished product and costs you more money. Same thing here. I want you to build this wall once, and I want you to enjoy it until you're old and feeble, and then I want your next of kin to enjoy it until they're old and feeble, and so on and so forth. Well, actually, I don't want you to become feeble. But anyway, moving right along, I was going to say, Charles Dickens walks into a bar. The bartender says, Oliver Twist. He was ordering a martini. Anyway. Okay, for those of you that are not Dickinsonians or martini drinkers, we'll move right along. I have pre-selected this stone. I have strong hands. I can do the one hand thing, but this is 20 pounds probably. Let's see.
Tony, we have another question
And
here.
I'll give you another answer. Bring it on.
If you're making a small wall, say 2 feet with 3/4 way up the back, soil with 3/4 way up the back,
Right?
how many courses would you have which were neat below the soil side?
On the face of the wall. Typically speaking, I go 2 rows of stone deep on the outside, regardless of the thickness of stone. I mean, if they're really, really thin stones, I might want to do more than that, but I'd say 10% of the height of your wall. A 2-foot wall is 24 inches, 10% would be 2.5 inches. These happen to be about 1.5 inch stones, give or take. So you get the general idea. But 10% of the height of your wall, you would put below your final grade of your soil, not counting mulch or whatever, but just actual dirt. So yes, you're installing into a trench with the first couple of rows. And yes, that means you're going to have to dig even deeper than that to put the base rock underneath. But guess what? You just produced some soil that hopefully you can use behind your wall. But that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. Exception to that would be if you're on a hillside lot, for example, it's much of the same as building. Well, these are retaining walls. They're little retaining walls, really, and they don't generally have a surcharge or a load. There isn't a house or a patio or a driveway atop it. It's going to be a veggie garden or whatever. But building on a slope, generally speaking, even for short walls, I recommend consulting an engineer. A soils engineer would generally know exactly what to do. And if the community you live in has permit requirements for the walls you're building based on its height, for example, or what kind of a load will be up on top of the ground behind it, then engineering is mandatory. Because hillsides are a strange beast to build a retaining wall on, especially with stone and stuff. The 10% will change. I guarantee you, if an engineer were to sign off on building your stone wall on a hillside, they're going to have you go deeper than that to begin with. And the base rock may be different. It may end up being concrete instead of base rock. And engineering can get complicated and more expensive. But for a simple garden box like what we're doing here now, I'm assuming it's relatively flat ground and we don't have unusual stresses or loads that are being put against it. That being the case, what we're talking about now should cover you. Again, I haven't seen your site, so I can't comment specifically about it. If you're in the Bay Area of San Francisco, where I am, well, of course, it's not a sales pitch, but give me a call. And if I can help you out or give you a thought, I'm happy to do so. If you're in another country, I have no idea what your building codes and standards are, or even another part of California or another state for that matter. So I would consult with your local planning and building departments of your government agency. And they may have guidelines or booklets or handbooks on regulations or what you're going to have to do if you want to build a wall, or you may. I just know them by heart here, that's all. But very good questions. How deep do you bury the thing? 10%, that's how deep you bury it. Even for the wall behind me here that I'm going to show you, the rule would still apply. But regarding this one, you get the general feel. And I picked stones for each row that, again, were very similar in thickness. If you wanted a design that looks more interesting, some of these stones out in the yard were double the thickness of what I have here. And other ones I found that were half the thickness of one stone. You picture one that's double, it has to go, wherever it goes over here somehow, we have to make that up again with other thicknesses of stone to get it even again. And it looks a little repetitive. If you just do double, 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 it's the same thing that I did here. But if you start having them varying in height, it just requires more time and more effort, a little bit more thought. So it's slower to do, and it'll drive you crazy faster. But it looks good. It's worth the effort when it's done properly and you take the time to actually get it all put together. But boy, oh boy, is it going to take you longer. And again, I had a few hours to put this together, so I did the easiest way possible. You know what? This isn't sitting the way that it's supposed to go, and it just dawned on me, I know why. There's a saw cut edge. If you can see it all, compared to the natural edge, it's a different color, it's smoother, it's shinier looking. And if we were to build a wall having both these kinds of edges looking, frankly, it would look very amateurish and ugly. I would have an issue with my contractor if he was going to build a wall that looked like that with the cut and the natural, unless it was deliberately designed to make that kind of a statement. But there you go. It drove me crazy out there in the pallet business. One's been cut on two sides. They're not supposed to do that. Someone must have returned the stone with the cuts on the sides. But that having been said, that's why I say don't do it. It does not look good. Beyond that, if the stone fits and you don't mind it looking weird, then go ahead. But I wouldn't do it if I were you.
Tony, another question regarding the base. So
Yeah.
there's an attendee that lives in Phoenix area of Arizona where the soil is very hard and it's not very easy to dig.
Did you say Phoenix?
Yes.
Oh, my beautiful fortunate fiance, Lori, hails from Chandler, so I know where Phoenix is.
All right. So as you know, the soil is very hard there and it's almost cement type of soil below the top. I guess it's called caliche. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
That's close enough.
So would you still recommend the 4 inches of crushed rock for a base?
Yeah, I would.
Really?
Yeah, I would generally say that that's going to do you just fine. If you were on actual bedrock, for example, regardless of what type of bedrock it is, the base rock thing, you could probably get away with not using it at all. But the digging of it and getting it uniform and level and smooth, it's almost better if you have a little bit of base rock or sand or something just to make an easier surface to get uniform and smooth. But no, I like having the base rock no matter what's underneath. But also bear in mind in the Bay Area here, sure, we have mountains, which means rock, but there's soil and around San Francisco Bay, there's a great deal of clay oftentimes. And our water table situation can get weird. So the ground can go up and down a little bit over between summer and winter, or droughts or rainy years. So again, that stable base, like preparing your house. You wouldn't scrimp on the sanding and chipping the paint, and you wouldn't put paint on your exterior walls without primer, I hope. And it's the same thing. The base rock is like the primer. I still advise doing it, and the cost isn't going to kill you unless you have a huge amount of wall you're doing. Otherwise, it's a couple of dollars. It's really not a big deal. The base rock's the cheap part. The hardest part of the base rock isn't paying for it. It's having somebody shovel it up and move it around with wheelbarrows, frankly. Because it's a pain to do. That's not fun. But that's all I have to add as I can think of about that. And you get, now that having been said, by the way, very good question about different types of soil conditions, however. And of course, you're from Arizona, so you already know about the Arizona sandstone. And I assume you've been to Sedona, so you know what an interesting color the Sedona is. It's funny, out here as a landscape designer and contractor, I don't get much demand for the use of the Sedona stone just because it's color, really. And I think it's a very cool stone, but it's not as popular here for some strange reason. I've been to Sedona. I saw the cathedral built into the mountainside. Very, very cool. It's Tony's tourism tips apparently as well. But that having been said, a mushroom walks into a bar. The bartender says, "Get out of here. We don't serve your kind." The mushroom says, "Why not? I'm a fun guy." Okay, waka, waka, waka. Now again, we did no grout joints in here, and that's all well and good. If we did do grout joints, there'd be grout in the stones, between them as well. And you have the look of that. If you were to use grout, you need to think about, can your design tolerate having grout joints that are, say, approximately 1/2 inch thick or so, or thicker, which makes them fairly visible, or are we going to try to make them thinner than that, which can be a real challenge, but can be done. The only reason I said that is depending on the color of stone you have, you might consider coloring your grouts. And there are the same kind of coloring materials that are used to color concrete. You can color your grout as well. You can make a design statement, or you can try to make it that the grout lines blend in more and don't seem quite so prominent. And that can be done as well. Otherwise, I like the dry stack look for most of my projects where feasible based on the design. It's popular here. That dry stack look is wildly popular here. And my own personal taste is I like kind of a natural look to things rather than contrived and deliberate. So I seldom get calls for recreating the gardens of Versailles on someone's property, for example. But and if I did, that would be too big of a job anyway. And I don't know anything about Versailles, so So there you go. I don't have anything else to add on that. The quantities of stone, the ordering and purchasing of stone, for wall rock, like such as this is natural wall rock that I'm going to show you in a moment. In fact, because I'll be blocking your way, I'll probably be showing you how to build a wall from while you're standing behind it. Don't do it if you can avoid it. But generally speaking, stones are sold by the ton. The exception is these Arizona pieces are sold on a per piece basis. But the ordinary stone is sold by the ton. Lyngso has formulas for how many square feet a given type of flagstone, how many square feet per ton that you'll get out of it. And that's valuable knowledge to have. How much tonnage am I going to need would be the length of your wall, the width of your wall. This is nominally 12 inches, for example. Nothing wrong with going wider or narrower, but you need to know how many square feet you have to work that square foot formula per ton. Then, this, for example, let's find out how big is this is about 2 foot by 1 foot. Let's call it 2 square feet. So if you had a flagstone that there was 20 square feet per ton, for example, then you do the math. That's to figure out exactly how much square feet you're going to need total. If it's a wider wall, of course, then your square footage is going to go up on a per layer basis. The bottom line was figure out the square footage of one layer of your wall, multiply it times how many layers are you going to have, and how do you figure that out? When you were at the stone yard looking at the pallets and probably marking the pallets that you really wanted, you had a general idea of how tall you want your wall to be. Well, go look at the pallet. How thick are the stones averaging out to? A 2-inch stone, an 18-inch wall, you need 9 rows. If it's an 1.5 inch stone, then you need 12 rows. And how many square feet per row? Factor all that math into there. And then I would allow at least 10% above and beyond that, because look at all this garbage. This used to be a part of the stone. You're gonna have lots of garbage coming off of it. And you're gonna have oops stones where you wanted it to break one way and it broke 100 ways the wrong way. I'd say 10% is typically a good average to allow for a breakage and spillage and whatnot. You may not be able to return that at the end of the job. Remember that. If you buy a full pallet, you're probably going to be required to return a full pallet, or you get to keep it. So it's important to try to get your quantities correct. With the Arizona stones, such as here, it's super easy to do because they're 12 inch by 12 inch, 12 by 18. They have 12 by 24 inch. They've got 18 by 24 inch. There's all kinds of sizes. And again, it's just averaging out the thicknesses to know how many rows you're going to need. But the math on that is super easy. The math on this is also easy, just a little less easy than the other. I mean, unless you are terrible with math, in which case get your husband, wife, child, friend, or whatever to do it for you if necessary. But the math is important to have it correct. I wasn't trying to be mean, but just as important that you get your math right. If you're shopping at Lyngso, they can help you to figure all this stuff out. Should you not remember everything Tony said because he talks so darn fast. It's all good, but they know how to help you out to get what you need and not buy 5 times the amount that you really needed to have, or get too little. That's also a boo-boo. Each pallet of stone, natural raw stone, will vary in color. So when you're picking your pallets out, the best you can do is look at the edges and see how the coloring looks, and look at the top row of the various pallets probably. Or if you're on edge, you can look at both fronts and both ends. But color will vary. Even if the stone is supposed to be monochromatic, you'll get it all apart and find pieces that may be a little weirder. It's just buyer beware about looking at the stone very carefully to be certain that what you're picking, the palette you're picking or the type of stone you're picking is really what you want to have. For example, Connecticut bluestone comes in different shades. It's not all blue. That's generic, that term Connecticut bluestone, kind of sort of. There's greenish grayish ones. There are some that I've seen that look rusty brownish with greenish grayish. There are light blue ones, and there's another one that's kind of a light purple color called lilac. They're not all created equal. So back to the design of your garden and what you're trying to accomplish here doesn't end just because you've already started buying your stones or whatever. You got to go back to the design. Will the blue stone that looks purple work for you guys if that's all you could get? Or do you need to have the ones that are blue? Or will the greenish grayish ones work? The greenish grayish ones are the most plentiful and the least costly of the bunch. The blue costs more than that, and the lilac or purple ones, I believe, cost more than the blue now, and it's not that common just laying around in a stone yard, the purple one. But it's a cool color though, if you like purple. Once it's, this is a wobble factor again, and we're back to you put a chip to stabilize it, or if we had built up the back, build it up and have that chip back there to keep it steady. And, you know, and as I said, fill in the gaps, and I put sand to fill in all the gaps, and you'll have the soil up behind there. Bring the soil up to the wall and pack it down firmly behind the wall to help, well, it strengthens the wall, but soil is not glue. It doesn't stick your stones together. It doesn't hold them together or anything else, but it's a collaborative effort between the stone and that soil mass that all together, when it's all compacted and firm, they do help each other to stay put. At least for limited heights. If you start getting taller and taller, it becomes an engineering thing and it's much more difficult to have everything stay happy. Especially if there's a hill behind your wall, that's where the engineers come into play. But for a raised bed for veggies or whatever, you needn't worry about excessive force or anything like that. For stone walls such as this, you needn't worry about drainage, in my opinion. There are so many gaps and so many pockets and so many openings that moisture, if it wants to find a way out, will find its way out. One thing I do want to warn you about, however, especially in the Arizona, if you were to put the glue product, don't just put a big long bead that's going zigzaggy from one end all the way down to the other, and another one that's all the way down to the other, and you squish them all down, and that's all well and good. But water that's trying to come from the dirt behind out, you created a dam with those beads of that adhesive product. The water can't get anywhere. Yes, it can get through the vertical joints, but I much prefer that water have the ability to get out any way it wants to get out, rather than having, you know, water pressure potentially build up or pool up and do weird things for you. So if you just put your adhesive product not in continuous beads, or a bead with a gap and a bead with a gap, or have the beads running in this direction, but something that has openings that water could conceivably get through. You're not going to have big old openings, but you know, water at a microscopic level, at a molecular level or whatever, is small. It can get through small spaces. And then you needn't worry about drainage. You don't have to put crushed rock with drain pipes or French drains. You don't need to worry about any of that stuff as far as the wall is concerned. If you live on a site where drainage issues are a problem, then look much more carefully at that topic and don't just say, Tony said, don't worry about it. If you have drainage problems, you always have to worry about it and should think about everything you do that could alter, make worse or make better your drainage concerns. You don't want to create a problem and it means while you're in the middle of solving another problem. Unless you love solving problems, in which case you can have an awful lot of fun and you won't have to worry about wasting valuable time watching TV. You'll be out trying to solve your garden problems. Okay, here's my floor map that I was trying to put to protect the floor. Not all stones are created equal. This is important to tell you this. Hammer and chisel, trying to cut a stone such as this, the limestone, it can be done, but it's a pain and you're going to have an awful lot of oops moments. Nibbling away edges is a relatively simple thing to do. And you take the, a gentleman that worked for me about 35 years ago has a blue handle, this particular hammer. And his daughter was very young and loved to watch the Smurfs. And one day I remember asking him to get my mason's hammer and he brought it over to me and said, okay, here's your Smurf hammer, because of the blue color. I guess Papa Smurf was blue or wore blue or something. So I still call them the Smurf hammers. If you go to a supply place and ask for a Smurf hammer, they will call security on you. It's called a mason's hammer. You don't want to appear a crazy person. Ask it for a mason's hammer. But this kind of hammer, and I'm going to do this just because I'm showing it, wear your eye protection when you're hammering and chiseling and sawing and whatever. But a lot of these edges, it's all wavy and zigzaggy. You can cheat and use a chisel and you can nibble away at them. I learned in the last workshop, don't talk and hammer at the same time. Sorry, Ken. It makes it a lot straighter and more even. You can use the heavier end of the hammer to generally accomplish the same thing. Now, this was an easy one. Sometimes if you're trying to do such a thing, you can either blow off a big chunk of the stone that you didn't want to do, or it won't fracture away perpendicular to the surface. It'll go on a slant, and now all of a sudden it's hollow way down there, but it's perfect up here. Welcome to stonework. You get an awful lot of those moments where now what do I do? In which case you could just keep nibbling more gently to try to get things to even up. Now the stone has become shorter, so your next stone in line, start at one end and work your way to the other for doing these. Don't start at both ends and try to make the middle. I advise against it, although it can be done. I prefer, like I said, what if I have to keep moving this up as I keep fixing it? This is getting shorter and shorter and everything's shifting over. I just prefer to start at one end and work my way over. As far as keeping things level, the floor is level here, so I had it easy. And I frankly, even if it's not level, you can't tell. So had I not told you, you wouldn't have known. But generally speaking, you do want to work on keeping it quasi level. My little level, I actually haven't checked. Let's see. This says this end is lower than the other end here. Okay, fine. But you want to be averaging out to roughly level. With whatever you're doing, even a wall, a rubble style stone wall such as this, you want to try to average out being level. It's impossible to get everything perfect without devoting way too much time into getting it that perfect. You don't need it that perfect. Even to sit on, it doesn't need to be that perfect. So I would not waste your time, frankly. So, that's all I got to say about that behind there. The filling of the soil, when you do put soil in, don't just put 2 feet of soil all loose and hope for the best. I like to put in lifts or layers of soil, I don't know, 6 to 8 inches. And in like a veggie box or whatever, really, you don't have to go crazy trying to compact the soil down, but it's not scientific. But I would get back there and I would go like this all over the place and then put another layer and do that. And for a planting bed, that generally will be enough. You can also soak the living heck out of it. Unless you're in California and we don't want to waste water, but water will also settle the soil down and compact it. But if you put 2 feet of soil and then try to water the heck out of it, you got to be certain that the water got through all 2 feet, settling everything down uniformly. And it can get weird. Really, on my jobs, I do this, and it may not look very scientific, but it works. So that's what I do. It's a great leg workout. You get your steps standing still. And no, I don't wear a Fitbit. I just do lots of steps. Now that having been said, you see, I pre-built much of this wall. Partly to save time, partly to show you, to visualize, that's what that thing looks like. Okay, fine. Well, it starts out looking like a basket or a pile full of rocks. They're not numbered. Yeah, there's no plan or anything. Nature just said, here, have fun, and kind of abandons you with a pile of rocks, and now you have to figure out, what do I do with all these things? Part of the thinking of these kinds of walls, and this is what I do when I'm doing it, I get my basket or my pallet of rocks or whatever, and I start separating them. Not necessarily little ones and big ones and whatever, but I will pick through the piles and I'll try to put them good looking side facing up. Now, at least the Napa wall rock, for example, you're always going to have, generally, this is 30 pounds. You have the good looking side, and the Napa wall rock tends to have a lot of lichen and a lot of weathering, a patina, if you will, of weathering on it. They have ugly sides like that. Because all these stones have been sitting for millennia on top of the ground, and the ugly side of the Napa will always be this brown. It really, I think, is horrible, hideous, and the mark of an amateurish job, in my opinion, being the snob that I am about this. If you're going to make a wall, I'd suggest using the good-looking side, but you want to do everything you can to make it that you're not having stones with a whole bunch of that showing instead. And I've seen people who have gotten stones that it fit perfectly with the ugly side facing out. So rather than work the stone or chisel or grind or do what you have to do to get it to work flipped over, they just did the lazy way and put the ugly side out. And if that's what you like, go ahead. But I'm just telling you that my clients have always preferred having walls that have all the pretty uniform side. Otherwise, you get that. So that having been said, put them with the good looking sides up. If you want to separate them, big ones, small ones, medium ones, that's fine. If you're going to separate like that, I would also recommend stones that are kind of roundish in profile, segregated out from the stones that are more angular. For building these kinds of walls, the round ones are a real pain. The angular ones are easier to work with. So I've tried to pick some angular ones to build all of this with. I don't know if Ken can zoom down below me here, but I have my garbage pile of scraps and chips and whatever. And especially with walls like that, these things are absolute gold. Big chips, little chips. If you can find some that are somewhat flat and narrow and thin, more like wafer shaped, those are even better. And the triangular shaped ones are particularly helpful too. Little ones and bigger triangular shaped ones. You'll be using them, so don't throw them away. Now that having been said, you can see I've got, here's the soil for our garden bed, which is going to get, taken away when this workshop is done, of course. I assume the dirt will be staying in yours for a lot longer. But I've left a hole for you, and I got rocks, so let's find a rock. You'll have days where, good Lordy, you just look at a hole and you walk over and pick up a rock, and it was like it was created for that purpose. And then there will be the days where you're going to spend 6 hours on one stupid hole, and you've looked through 175 rocks, and you can't find one that will fit. It just happens. That's when the grinder and the hammers and the chisels and the whatever and colorful language may come into play. With that having been said, this hole, for example. All right, so we've got a little bit of triangular opening here. This is kind of flat here. This one's almost squared off on this side here. You want to generally, I see things in 3D in my head, so this helps me a lot to visualize. How do you find the right stuff, for crying out loud? You don't always start at one end and work your way down. I mean, you start at one end, but then you'll see, I usually would go 3, 4, 5 feet and then start working the whole thing kind of throughout all at once. It becomes very organic and takes on a life of its own. And oftentimes you'll end up like this, a couple of stones, and you build over towards one end. It's like that one stone, now it brought everything up higher, and there's a hole in the middle to start filling in. And you really have to visualize through all of that, or it'll drive you insane or to drinking, one of the two. And I don't suggest you do either of those, go insane or drink excessively before you start working. This one's kind of longish. It's kind of triangular-ish. Now here's the deal, my tolerance for the ugly stones notwithstanding, but this one may have potential, even with a little bit of that ugly there. I just don't know, but we may also be able to turn it and put it facing like this. But let's see what we can do. But I just generally see a shape that looks like it might coexist peacefully with this hole. Apparently not in that way. Ooh. That's a maybe. Oh. Calling that one a maybe. I'm trying to build a stone wall from the side. I advise you get in front of the wall and look at it. I'm generally liking that. The wobble thing is a thing you're going to have to deal with, unfortunately. And there's no way to take that away. But I'm generally liking the shape of this thing otherwise. Oh, it's just a matter of getting it sitting right. Now we got that little hole in there. That's going to be a joy to do. You notice the dirt level. I keep bringing the dirt level up as I'm building the wall up. Or if there's like a little, you're cutting into where the dirt already is, cut it back so you have enough ample room to get behind it and work from behind with all of it. You don't want to be up against the hard ground or solidified ground. You need working room. So I get a stone or two in place, bring the soil back. You're going to start tamping the soil down and working it all in, bearing in mind that if you're not also feeling your stone for if it's trying to move or holding your stone against that force, you're just going to end up blowing the stone out, and all that dirt will have also tamped itself farther out than where you need it to be. Now to put it back, you have to dig the dirt back, put it back and start all over again. So be mindful of that. Now that having been said, we've got smaller holes, and smaller holes are more challenging. Top stones, that's an important thing too. The top of the wall depends on what, if you want a seat, for example, on the top of the wall, more effort has to be put into selecting the stones that are going to have reasonably flat tops. Typically speaking, they'll have kind of like a 90-degree corner. This one roughly does. I mean, wildly rounded off or jagged or whatever would be uncomfortable to sit on and look weird. I just lucked out that that one happens to have a nice 90-degree corner edge on it. But top stones, I segregate as special stones unto themselves. So they get a special pile, and they get, the best parking spots, the best theater tickets. They get everything because they're special. And it's important that you make mental note of what you have in your supply of top stones. Both of these are kind of smaller with a flat side on them, and I'm hoping that one of them, well, this one. Ooh. And sometimes it's like the skies have parted and the angels are singing, and that rock looks like it has potential for there. I don't know, it's a matter of taste. I'm not liking that way so much. I think this has potential right there. And this one again, good luck finding a whole bunch of stones that were custom made to fit into a slot like that. This one has this weird hook shaped on it. Stuff like that is also very valuable because everything is very three-dimensional here, very unpredictable. And something like that sometimes can hook itself over a spot or a thing. Well, I don't know, let's see. That's pretty terrible. Let's not do that. That's a maybe. I wish this was a little bit more attractive like this out here was, but it's not so ugly that it wouldn't work. I'm wondering if we can get, see that one, it's gonna take, I'm not gonna do that for the purposes of this course. I can get this one to work. There's this big bump on this side of the stone here. and the corresponding area where it's trying to interfere with on this stone is down here. I'd say I wouldn't use the chisel, the hammer. If you try to hammer away and chip away with the hammer, you're gonna blow this into a bunch of little scrappy pieces. But I take the grinder and I'd be grinding that away or grinding this down until you can finally get that nestled back in there. And good grief, it just matches, it looks beautiful, it looks wonderful. And that's the cheating with the stones with the grinder thing. That's worth its weight in gold getting one of those. And again, I'm just not gonna do it for you here now, but I would definitely be installing this stone in there. Bearing in mind that when you're putting it all together, yeah, you're putting things, kind of putting it on and trying it on from the front. But if you had a stone that was like wedgie shaped and, oh, look, it slips in, it's just fine. That's what will happen with it. They have to be able to keep themselves together over time. They have to interlock kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, but without the little weird shapes that jigsaw puzzles have. But you can't just put all the stones in from the front and hope for the best because they're not going to stick. Mortaring stones like this can be done, and I'll get to that in a moment in greater detail, especially if you're going to be sitting on it. Because notice that all these stones are, well, all these stones are loose. Again, gravity and friction are holding them in place. They're not designed, nor are they happy with animals or kids or whatever climbing all over them and running into them, and we run wheelbarrows into them or whatever. Each rock is individual unto itself, and you can have things start falling out sometimes. More effort, if it would be put into this, and making a thicker wall. For 18 inches tall, 2 feet tall, you can get away with one row thick of stones, and that's what I've done here. There's not another row of stones behind. You start getting taller, or you start having loads such as people on top of the wall all the time, or you're going to use it as a table, or God knows what, another row of stones behind, built in a similar fashion, except with less consideration for the pretty side, just structurally getting everything knitting together like a jigsaw puzzle, so that it's becoming a mass of stone. And again, in the joints in between, just like when they built stone walls and buildings way back in the day, all the garbage. I mean, you're going to have little pieces, and it's like, man, this thing's shaped like a marble. It's never going to work anywhere. It's totally garbage and can be used for fill. Use gravel, use this stuff, use all your debris to fill in the nooks and crannies. You want this thing to be reasonably solid. Now, even though it's going to be solid and dirt will have been packed into all of it, well, not that joint because I'm not done yet, but the dirt will have been packed into all the joints. Oops, here's also a little hole. We're going to have to cheat with that one too. Sometimes you can, all right, this one here, the aesthetic of your wall. These kinds of walls inherently have pits and nooks and crannies and things that show. If you want to have the joints looking tighter and the gaps looking smaller, then you can actually do that. And it's just a whole lot of extra effort to trim with the grinder and the hammer and the chisel more and more and more to get them to fit more closely together. That's why it could take hundreds of years to build a castle. You know, but boy, the fit and finish on those stones is because they took the time to do it. Take the time and you'll have an incredible looking wall that will look like something that a master stonemason put in. And based on the number of hours you will have spent doing it, you'll be a master stonemason too, but it totally can be done. But at least here again in Northern California, at least, the natural look with things being somewhat rustic and irregular is quite popular and perfectly acceptable to do it that way. So that's how it's often done. But like that one there, I'm putting dirt behind the rock and the dirt comes out. Well, if you don't mind that opening continuing to look like an opening, then I say plug the hole from behind with a piece of garbage stone, and then you put your dirt and start working it. And once it's all packed together there, it'll be fine. If the hole bothers you, then again, is work the bigger stones to get them all to start going closer together, or work a smaller piece of stone to somehow be in that hole and be able to stay put and not come flopping out, which means it has to have like a bulge on the backside of it or something to lock it into place so it won't push out on you. Totally can be done. It's just really time consuming. That's why stonework on a job is one of the most expensive things you can do in a landscape, other than ornamental ironwork and metal work, which gets really costly. But stonework is time consuming. And if you have someone who can do it really, really cheap because they whip it out really, really quickly, I'm hopeful that they have an extraordinarily skilled crew doing it, can do it fast and well, because otherwise, if they're only doing it fast, it's not done well. And that's just a sad reality of it.
And Tony, speaking of costs, can you talk a little bit about what the labor would involve versus what the material costs would be?
Well, I'll give you my best guess at it anyway. I'll give you the the disclaimer is that, you know, those can vary wildly depending on a couple of factors. Your geographic region, for one. I live in the most expensive part of the United States to live in. So labor and materials, everything is scary expensive. It cost me $135 of gas just to get you here today, and I'm 25 miles away. All right, kidding. But anyway, yeah. For whatever it's worth, Napa wall rock, this wall rock here, as far as wall stones are concerned, are one of the most inexpensive stones that we can get out here anyway. I've seen a few that are cheaper, but as far as the appearance of it, how good it looks versus the cost, I use a lot of these. And they also come in a bolder size called Sonoma Fieldstone. You want one the size of a Volkswagen, we can do it. You want one the size that's only, you know, 3 times the size of that can be done too, and they're cost effective. The flagstone here, I don't even know the pricing of the azure limestone or azure limestone. But as flagstone products go, it's not exactly dirt cheap. Well, it's stone, it's not dirt cheap at all. Let me give you an average. For this wall here, I would say 60% of the cost would be the labor and 40% of the materials, maybe 50-50 if you're lucky. This one here, it's weird. It's not a catch-22, but the materials will be a little bit less because it's a less per ton price. But the labor goes up. You know, really, I would just basically say, see the pants, 2/3 of your cost is always going to be the labor. As a general rule, there can be exceptions. Also, is it going to be a dry stack wall or any kind, or the stone's going to be glued in place? The gluing in this kind of wall is not, the extra labor is almost no extra labor. Squirt out some glue, put it together, tap it together with a dead blow hammer, get it all uniform and sitting properly. Because, you know, when you dead blow hammer the things, they can shift and wiggle a little bit. So the labor is almost the same for gluing it. Mortar all of a sudden gets more complicated. This wall here, because it's dry stack, which means there's nothing but stone, you know, or stone chips and dirt. Getting it stable and solid is a fair amount of effort, as I've indicated. So you're creating, it's like you have a jigsaw puzzle and you don't have the cover of the box and you have pieces missing. You know, and yet you have to build the whole puzzle out of it. It's a lot of work. If you were to mortar these stones in place, you get a much more solid wall. The labor, sometimes it's almost quicker and easier to achieve with the mortar than it is to using the stone. And because the mortar is, you know, it's liquid when it goes in, or it's pasty when it goes in, but it becomes, it's, you know, it's liquid rock. And that will ultimately end up with a stronger bond and things stuck together better, so to speak. Dirt isn't glue. Like I said, dirt isn't mortar. It helps to support, but it doesn't actually adhere to a stone or anchor a stone per se. So there's a product called back mortar, a process called back mortaring. And it's actually that. The stone from the wall from the front will look like this, but when you're installing it from the back side, you're not putting dirt in the back. You've got mortar that's going in all the various regions in the back to get into the nooks and crannies, to conform to the weird shaped holes back there. The mortar, quote unquote, sticks to the stones and kind of, it holds everything together and makes it much more solid. Structurally, that's a benefit to do that. If it's a wall you're going to sit or climb on, I would say it's mandatory that you do that, because otherwise those loose stones on top, if I were to bump into these right now, they're all going to come tumbling down. I know the dirt's not all the way up and all that, but still, it's not that solid. If you had 2 rows of stone and you really work well at interlocking them, and you have stretchers, which are, picture another row of rocks back here. Now our wall's gotten twice as fat or twice as deep. Stretchers are sort of more linear in shape, but instead of having a row of rocks and a row of rocks, a stretcher is every few stones in where the next stone would go in, it's more linear and it sticks all the way through to the other side. So now it's tying things together better. And that makes a much, much stronger, more stable wall that even dry stack holds together better. But, you know, for a wall this low, you can get away with just 1 row of rocks and not do it that way. But there are dry stack techniques that will give you a stronger wall that is taller and could be sat on even without mortar. But as a DIY project, that's a little bit more involved to do. There are a million resources online to look at about how to do the techniques I'm referring to. I don't really watch them because I already do all this stuff and already know how to do it, but they're out there. And my seminar is not supposed to be on giving you every step-by-step on how to build a stone wall. I'm kind of more trying to show you the general overview and trying to give you some pitfalls to avoid, or things that I've learned, or, you know, ways to cheat. that don't negatively impact your pocketbook or your safety or the aesthetic of your project, but maybe save you some valuable time, or just make it that you're not, going crazy by the time you get in the house and you're so sick of stonework, you've only been at it for 3 hours, you've got another 3 weeks worth of work to do. That could be a problem. Yeah, but the backbordering, I strongly recommend doing that at the very minimum for a wall you're going to sit on top of. It holds everything. So it's a solid wall then, and much safer. Walls like this, yeah, if you've got kids or big dogs or whatever, you're going to have the occasional stone that's going to come down, no matter how solidly you built it. It'll probably happen. So be skillful at how to patch that back up again. The good news is if it's not mortared, it's dig the dirt away, get the stone in there, work it all together, and you can patch it back together again. It's not the end of the world. Driving a car into it or something, that's a little bit more exciting to repair, but it also can be done. You can also, this is a rule of thumb. Generally speaking, my whole base rock thing about walls like this, I am not so hard and fast about the base rock underneath the walls such as this. I have generally learned in my experience that things pretty much stay put, even without the base rock, unless you have a soil anomaly situation where it's particularly weird, really expansive. You've got a water table that's a problem for you. For an average soil situation, I usually can get away with not even putting this on top of base rock. I bury these stones at least 3 to 4 inches deep, the first row, not 10%, but 3 to 4 inches minimum for a 2-foot wall. Dry stone, rubble style stone, not regardless of what name the rock is, what color it is, the techniques are similar. That having been said, your largest stones tend to be on the bottom. Maybe it's for obvious reasons, they're heavier, you don't have to lift them so high. Well, no, that's not it. What was I gonna say? Hold on, I had a thing. Oh, no, I told you. Did I tell you the snake joke already? Snake slithers into a bar, the bartender says, get out of here, and the snake says, why? The bartender says, because you can't hold your liquor. All right, maybe I did do that one already, but anyway. Where was I going with that? Oh, the bigger stones. It's an aesthetic thing. I don't recommend a row of giant stones, or the biggest ones that came in your load of stones, all on the bottom, and that's it. Big rocks with little ones on top. Not a good idea. But the largest ones are kind of anchor stones. They are foundations for your wall and provide a more stable base upon which to put everything else. Additionally, I believe that they do offer greater strength in soil, and there are forces in action all the time trying to move things around and cause things to shift. And the larger, heavier, more immobile stones at the bottom help to create a stronger wall. If you had this first row out, I would still recommend, and this wall, 18 inches, 2-foot wall, you've got 2 or 3 rows of rocks, you're done. But I would work some of the medium size or the big medium ones into the middle row as well. And you may luck out, there could be a stone near an end or something like that one's got a fairly good size to it, where you can get from the bottom to the top with just a bigger stone and one that's got a larger profile but fits, and one stone in your set, and you're at your full height already. Visually, I think that looks better to have that variety scattered throughout as best you can, other than the obvious big ones, medium ones, small ones. And the smallest ones on the top are the most likely ones to get knocked over and kicked about and whatever anyway. But it's important to put your largest, most stable, solid stones at the bottom of any given stone wall, with almost no exception, especially a dry stack wall. And I do lots of Napa wall rock walls because, again, it's wildly popular and the cost is right. And they look good. But it depends on the look you're going for, too. If you want a formal garden kind of a thing, a proper English garden, perhaps, or something of that nature. Not to say these kinds of stones don't work, but this coloring just evokes rustic and natural, like we have, redwood forests in California and things of that nature. So it's back to the design of your garden and what look are you trying to accomplish. You could do flagstone as a stacked wall just like this, but with the cut edge that I was, speaking much bad about. If you like that more contrived, more deliberate, more architectural perhaps look, then the cut edges are the way to go. And the Arizona stones can be purchased with the cut edges as well. Nothing wrong with that. My personal wiring is I like the more natural look myself. Now, of course, at my property, and Lori can attest to the fact, I have great ideas in my head, and I've been in that house for many, many, many years now, and not a whole lot of it's gotten done. The cobbler's kids with the shoe thing, and I'm totally guilty of all of that. But I've assured Lori that yes, there will be an end in sight, and I didn't mean another 15 years from now. I meant a lot sooner than that. So just bear that in mind. But it's back to the look of your garden. The cost is something you have to consider. Selection of stone will help you a lot in your budgetary journey through this. Not all stone costs are equal. When you look at a pile of flagstone, for example, and consult with Lyngso staff or staff at wherever it is you go. Of course, I prefer that you shop at Lyngso if you can. But not all stones cut the same. Not all stones that are smooth on one side, but the other side has bumps and things all over it that you need to get smooth somehow. Some are relatively easy to fix, and others are a nightmare to get them fixed. The workability of a given stone may affect your choice of what stone to use. Not just is it pretty and is it the color I like. There are a lot of other factors you should consider. Availability of the stone is also important. If you need 5 pallets of stone after you've done the calculation of the quantities and there are 4 pallets present, how long will it take to get that other pallet? Is it going to be the same color or a matching color? Can you work with your project if it were to come out and it's a different shade a little bit? Just like flooring, whether you have a real wood floor or a laminate floor, even though all the boxes in their manufactured, they're all supposed to be the same. I hope you're looking piece by piece and you're going to have some pieces that you think are ugly. Don't put them in. Or if they're paid for and you have to use them, you randomly scatter them throughout. You don't want 3 of the ugly ones out of the 5 next to each other and the other 2 are around the corner in the other room. You can do that with stone too. In fact, when you're picking from pallets, if you have multiple pallets in a job, I would say segregate your stones by thickness or by where the good edges are, or pick the top pieces and segregate them out. But beyond that, I would start drawing from alternate palettes to keep variety of color kind of uniform throughout if that is going to matter to you. Because they're never going to be identical. Even if the top stones looked identical, wait till you get in the middle of it and you find out that they're blue on top and they're greenish rusty colored inside. It happens. But the staff would help to guide you about the stones that can't have streaks of rust through them. There's a really nice flagstone called Bouquet Canyon, which is cost effective. I wouldn't say cheap, but it's a flagstone product and a wall rock product that's cost effective, but it can be a really pretty sparkly blue that also can have rusty streaks in certain batches of it. And if you don't like that rusty streak color, then you better be careful about which ones you pick. Because otherwise, I've had batches where they're all blue, and I had a batch 1 year or many years ago where it was 80% more the rusty color than it was the blue color. And that was a challenge to work with that one. So you've been warned. It's fun, don't get me wrong. It's like going, countertop shopping at the marble, granite stores. Actually, that's overwhelming because there are too many choices. But there are so many choices that you can make. And it's back to do it yourself. I've spoken with many potential clients even who attended various workshops here. Most of them were pre-COVID, but still that hoped and believed and wanted to do it themselves and looked at all this and said, oh my God, there's no way I'm ever going to do that or want to or would be able to. And you should decide this for yourselves, but think about it. These stones are brutally heavy. They're dangerous. It's hard, sweaty, ugly work. This is all the bad stuff. It is frustrating beyond belief. I have picked stones that were the perfect stone. Even at the garden show, I've had times where coming up on we have 8 hours left of setup time and you only get 72 hours. And there's this perfect stone. It's going to be right at the entrance. And guess what happened to it with one little tap with the hammer? It turned into gravel. I've had that happen. And that will drive you crazy. But you have to be prepared for those kinds of things and look at it as a challenge, as an adventure, or it really will drive you mad. And again, I'm not trying to be negative, but if I sell you sell you in such a way on this whole thing, I'm falling in love with this idea. I don't want you to get partway through it and realize I can't or won't do this, and then have to regroup, and it will cost you more. If you hire a contractor who comes in on a partially done project, none of us want to do that. It'll cost you more. They may insist on undoing what you've already done and fixing it or making it their way. I'm not trying to badmouth contractors, but this is the real world. And this kind of stuff does happen. And contractors have the right to want it to be appropriate, to be well done. And they have no control over the quality of what was already done in someone else's work, even if it's yours or another person's, it doesn't matter. So I defend contractors in sometimes having to make those power decisions and have those conversations with clients, but it's essential. The bottom line is to have a lasting product that you're paying good money for this. With me, at least, you're making an investment and I want you to get a return on that investment for the rest of your life and then some. And sure, it sounds like a sales pitch, but I've been in business for a long time and I have very happy clients. As a result of that, I like to think, is that I really am acting in their best interest. But of course, my goal is to not be a nonprofit and go bankrupt. Of course, it's a business and everybody gets that, as do I. but it's your money being spent on your project. And if you're spending it to do it yourself, I'm hopeful that I'm helping you with this, warning about the things to look out for, design aspects and purchasing aspects to consider you might not have considered. And excuse me for just a second, there's a rock here. This one's, it's not wedged in tight. Again, this is getting torn down in a few hours. That was driving me nuts and it was turning a little bit. But it's important that you do it right. Do it once and do it right is something that my father taught me. And he says, if you're not going to do it once that first time, then don't bother doing it at all. And I would agree with you on that. Redoing a stone wall that's failed can be done, but it's a nightmare to do. And I'm pretty sure that if you've done it the first time around, you get to the end of it and all goes blah and falls apart, you may not be the one redoing it. You may end up spending big bucks having somebody else do it the second time around. And now you just paid twice for it, kind of, sort of. I don't want you to have to go through that. This is fun. If you don't do it for a living, I say working in the garden can be fun. It's a lot of work if you do it for a living, but I am passionate about what I do. I love what I do. And I love it if I'm able to help you here or from across the pond or down under or wherever you may be. It's important to me that it's a win-win for both of us, one way or another. And
Tony, I've got a question here.
oh, good. I don't have to talk anymore. Thank God you saved everyone.
All right. So it doesn't matter where you start from, left to the right or left, or in the center and go left or right. Where do you start?
Oh, that's easy. Are you in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere? Because in the southern hemisphere, you go around the other direction, first of all. It's a northern hemisphere joke. I don't know if it's funny to those of you in the southern hemisphere. And it doesn't matter if you're ambidextrous or left or right-handed. No, however, I've done scenarios where one end of a wall may be against another wall or the wall of the house or whatever, and the other end is freestanding or open, or it goes along and then has a 90-degree corner, or it's curvilinear and there are no other ends anywhere. You generally start at an end. Don't start at the middle and work your way out towards the ends. I would never do that. I don't like I said, for the Arizona wall, I would not start at both ends and try to work up in the middle. It will drive you mad when you get to the center. It's not going to be right. Don't do it. This kind of a wall I kind of showed you, I start at one end, get one end proper. Don't build the entire height all in one shot. Go a rock or two up, work your way along, get everything so it's working its way up and growing upwards. Sorry if your camera's going this way. Like this one, I put the bottom rock underneath it. You don't even see it. It's just a support stone. Then I put this one against it, and then I had my hole, and this rock wasn't there yet. Then I set this one. Then I jumped over and set that one and that one. I think I put this one next. And so you jump around with a rubble style wall more because you're creating different shaped holes. And it's not just lay this, and I'm just going to keep on going my way along. So I'm going to run along that slant there. Well, that's all well and good, but the other side of that rock, what's it have to go against? You don't know the shape of that hole yet. It's easier for me to do it like this. Look at the shape of that hole. If I didn't have this here yet, and I was trying to build all of these, I would not have picked that stone because it would not have been on top of this stone because they wouldn't have been there yet, because this stone won't stay on its own without that underneath it. So you have to jump around more on a rubble style wall. The flagstone, still, start at one end and work your way to the other end. I would prefer then, geez, you know, if this was a wall on one side and out exposed, so you're seeing both edges on the other, both ends on the other side, it would almost be easier for you to start at the house, the end away from the other wall and work your way all the way across, bear in mind that you're likely going to have to cut stones where you made up to that other wall that's already there. Or you're going to end up in a gap. It's only an inch. What do I do now? What you do now is you're going to have to take the other stone and make it smaller so you can put a bigger stone in, or go back a stone or two and fuss with it, because you don't want to have 1 inch wide or 2 inch wide strips of stone somewhere. It's not structurally sound. It looks stupid. And over time, those thinner, long pieces of stone are going to crack on you. It's very likely that they would crack. Just expansion and contraction. If the sun hits it or it gets cold at night, it's likely to happen. But because you have that other wall there, it does not matter what the other side looks like. You're probably going to be using a saw to cut them all. And that's fine, great, because you'll never see that saw cut edge. Oh, saw cutting. I jump around a lot. It's not that I'm crazy or anything like that. I just jump around a lot. But speaking of, if this was a wall of your house, or a concrete wall, or whatever kind of wall, you're never going to see any of these, and you saw cut this one, I would advise that you remember where you put your smurf hammer down, because I'm terrible at remembering. But the top edge, if this is all natural on the edges all the way around, this is a natural finish, it's not polished or perfect. it's going to look absolutely straight as straight and perfect where it was saw cut. I went to show that on the top, when you're all done, and this is against the wall of the house and you don't see it, it looks like it's a natural cut edge on the stone rather than actually saw cut. It's totally an aesthetic thing, but attention to those kinds of details, frankly, separate the men from the boys. I shouldn't have said that. Separate the professionals from the not quite so much, because there are plenty of female stonemasons out there that I know. Some of them blow me away in the quality of the work they do. And others are, I'm not arrogant, but just I know what I'm capable of. And some of them are so good, I bow to them. They're so good at it. I don't care what their gender is, just happens that they're female. There are a lot of male stonemasons out there that are wonderful too. There are also terrible ones. Back to contractors. There are good ones and bad ones. And it's incumbent upon you, if you shop for a contractor or a designer, to do your homework, and do your own due diligence. And this is me violating the code and telling you things. Not all contractors are bad, not all butchers and meat markets are bad. Not all politicians, well, let's not do that. But the point just being, the little details like that, if you want it to look like a natural edge, but it's saw cut, it's a pet peeve of mine. Stairs. I see jobs where people have done stone for the stairs, and I've seen stairs where you have the natural edge, on the front, because it's natural appearance. That's the style they're looking for. And somebody got lazy and they installed the stone onto the step and mortared it all in, and then took a saw and ran the saw along the edge to cut the outside of it. I saw one where they only did it on some of the steps. Not a good look. But if you do it on all the steps still, it'd look rather shabby unless you're very deliberately as a designer wanting that saw cut look. But more often than not, as you can hear from me, the saw cuts are not a good thing to see. And how do you make them invisible? And little tricks like that. Because chiseling the stone to make it fit with the house being right here, you're likely to break your stone and kill it. Saw cut the darn thing and get it right. And then rough up the edges to make it look natural again. Arizona sandstone, you can cut with a chisel and a hammer. My flagstone paving workshop, I do that. And I'll take a piece and show people how to, on the pallet, the Arizona sandstone is stacked on edge, not flat, because they shatter and break when they're flat. So for transport, they're on edge. One big piece of Arizona flagstone can be 3 or 4 feet by 4 feet, and they can weigh 300 pounds or more. Cutting the pallets open are exciting. Let me just tell you that. Stonework's dangerous. Getting them off the pallet, like you cut the steel straps that hold the pallets together with the Arizona, and that steel, sharp as a razor blade thing, comes zooming away when you cut it. You can chop a head off with that. Seriously, it's really dangerous. But the stones are heavy beyond belief. So I show the clients how do you get one out of the pallet, get it onto the ground, even if you're all by yourself, but how do you make it into manageable sized pieces? And you can break a stone, a big Arizona stone, even a thick one, with just a hammer, not even using the chisel edge, just a hammer. These kinds of stones, that's not going to happen really. It's limestone. You can get there with chisel, but you're going to be there forever doing it, and you run a good risk of still breaking it in a way that you didn't want it to break. So saw cut and cheat when you can, and it'll save you valuable amounts of time. You'll have plenty of frustrating other things to do where you couldn't get saw but you wished you could have. There are tricks for breaking stones smaller and whatnot, that the top edge will have a natural look, but that you may have cheated with a saw halfway through it. And for walls, that doesn't always work very well, because picture if you cut halfway through the depth of it with a saw to make it a little easier, and pretend this is the ugly side. Flip it over, the good side's facing up, it still looks like a stone, but that saw cut line is halfway through there. There are ways to break the stone so it will break along the line that you cut underneath and have that natural edge to it. But it's not only the natural edge, but the natural runs halfway down, because you only had cut with the saw and made it shiny halfway up. So there are tricks to other ways to use a saw, but on a wall, depending on which way you're viewing the edge, you may see that saw cut at the bottom, and that's a sign of a shabby, lazy job again, from somebody who did not take the job seriously and cut corners. So you have to be careful about the techniques you use. It's really a matter of, is it going to be hidden or can you see it? Just like building houses, the stuff the contractors do, or the techniques that are used for the things you're never going to see in the framing inside, may not be pretty to look at. They work and they're structurally sound, but they're not aesthetically pleasing. But the sheetrock and the textures you put on or whatever, that's the pretty part. It doesn't have to be pretty underneath. And with this kind of work, it doesn't have to be pretty underneath. It has to be structurally sound and durable. Especially Arizona, it's sandstone, man, it's porous. Not like a sponge, but water technically enters it and penetrates it much more than other types of stone. It can be fragile over time. It stains over time, so sealing is essential. The limestone, much better, but it can stain too. Pretty much anything except maybe like, quartzite or quartz or granite maybe. Well, granite needs sealing too. But most stones consider them porous. The top of it should get sealed. There are sealers that can be put on that once it's dry, you can't tell there's a sealer on it at all. So it won't look different. But if you're gonna seal it, frankly, I would say seal everything. You can spray it on with a sprayer, you can paint it on with a paintbrush. Roller wouldn't work so well in all this, but I invest a couple of bucks in seal your product. You'll be happy you did down the road. It doesn't matter if you get dirt or mud on it or a glass of wine or who knows what, or blood if you did something dumb when you were gardening on top of the wall, but it'll be a whole lot easier to get it off of your stone. It also can help dust and just airborne things, or stone underneath trees, for example. Not just the tree leaves, if you leave them on there for too long, like redwood trees, the tannins in the redwood come out and can darken things and stain things. But dust and just, it rains under trees, at least in San Francisco, when the fog comes in, and that rain, look at your car after, when the tree was dripping all over it, your car's a disaster. And the wall, same thing. Even if you don't even plan on eating on that wall or whatever, it's gonna get icky over time, and the sealer will help to keep it much easier to clean later on. But you have to be diligent about applying the sealer, and I would say once yearly, regardless of what product you use. If you don't do it, it's not the end of the world. You're just gonna have to put more effort into cleaning the wall later on. But that's just the way that one kind of rolls. But okay, here's another one. 2 olives sitting in a bar. The olive is sitting up on the bar stool, and they're getting rip roaring drunk. All of a sudden, one of the olives falls off of his stool onto the floor, and he's on his back looking straight up, and his friend up above goes, oh my God, are you okay? And the olive on the floor says, yeah, I'll live.
Tony.
Yeah, I know. Tony, are you sure you want to be a stand-up comic? I know. But meanwhile, back on the farm, I repeat myself a lot, ask Lori, but the safety thing. You will hurt yourself if you don't think about actively on a moment-by-moment basis, how do I stay safe and unharmed? Oh, I didn't mention knee pads. Don't even think of kneeling on the ground once without a knee pad, because in all that soft-looking sand, there's that one piece, and it's going to find the exact right spot on you. Trust me, it will. And I'm trying to scare you about that one. Knee pads, absolutely. And gloves, you could do it with no gloves. You do get a better feel. And handling little teeny tiny pieces, I sometimes will cheat and use no gloves. But the reality is you're going to end up having cowboy hands, I call them afterwards, rough and coarse and like 11 layers of leather on your fingers because of the abuse that they've suffered. And God bless cowboys, don't get me wrong, but they work hard for a living. And it turns out so do I. But it's a great workout. How are we doing for time, Ken?
So we've got 10 minutes remaining,
Okay.
Tony, and I don't have any new questions.
No, that's fine.
But I do actually, I have one last question, but audience want to know if you have an Instagram account
Oh,
and where can they see your work?
hire me? Okay, anyway, moving right along as a plan B. I don't have an Instagram account at this moment in time. And my Facebook profile, frankly, here's the deal. I was born a century ago, or in the other century, and the technology world has not so much been my world. I'm not making excuses, but this is who I am. And those who know me would go, yeah. This is, this is me, and my world of electronics, not so much. I mean, I know how to turn my iPhone on and off now, thank God. That was embarrassing the first time I couldn't get it to shut off. But I'm working on all that, is what I'm telling you right now. My website is in the process of being rebuilt, but my older version of my website is there, of course, Redwood Landscape Inc.com. And I'd start there. It is, seriously, it's been a number of years and I'm sorely in need of redoing it. That's why I'm talking to my hosting company now, and over the next 4 or 5 weeks, we're going to get that up and better. But Instagram, that's a very good idea. And I've been told by many that I need to wake up and get in the 21st century. So yeah, sounds like an excuse and it sounds kind of lame, but it's the truth coming from me. I will work on that. Okay, here's the deal. It's funny, but not. In talking with those who are helping me with my website, photos that have enough pixels in them that are of sufficient quality to use for electronic purposes. My career started in 1979. The internet wasn't invented yet. Many photos of my work are plain old photos that were shot on film, and they're not electronically reproducible. So I was not expecting that. Boy, oh boy, do I have cool photos from back in the day. But if any of you can figure out how the heck do I get old photos like that onto the internet and you can actually see them, I'd be really happy to find out. But that's kind of it. No, I don't have Instagram at this moment in time. Pinterest, I have out there. I Pinterested creating files for clients. I accumulate photos and show the clients to kind of visualize some of the ideas that are floating around in my head for their properties. And I have gotten into the Pinterest end of things because of that. And it seems like people are always liking my Pinterest things. And I didn't know that they could do that. But it's there. But I don't have a Redwood Landscape Inc. Pinterest account where I'm putting photos per se, at least not yet. So good question. So I apologize for not being with the 21st century yet, but I'll get there sometime between now and the 22nd century. That much I know.
All right, Tony. So we've got a couple technical questions here, not technical, I guess, product questions. One is, are one sealer better than the other? And do you have a one that you use that you tell that? Yeah.
I don't have any particular brand loyalty. There are numerous brands out there. I'm really hesitant to throw out one. I know one name of one that I consider good, but it would be disrespectful to other brands that are out there that are equal as far as I'm concerned. That having been said, there are different types of sealers. Depending on what country you're in, or even what state or county for that matter. Like California, we try to do everything as green as possible and as clean as possible. So low VOC or VOC products are required in many areas and certainly encouraged. And that having been said, the bottom line is there what's called a wet look sealer, and it is what it sounds like, kind of. On concrete, for example, you put it, and it kind of gives it a little bit of a sheen that almost looks like you hose down your driveway, even after it's dry. The wet look sealer on these kinds of stone products, in my experience, don't make them shiny and look like they've just been hosed down, but they do give them a darker appearance and something that is a little sexier looking, frankly, than what you see right now. Generally speaking, I prefer to use any kind of a clear sealer that will, when it's applied, it looks, it darkens the stone when it goes on. As it dries to looking like you have nothing at all. And I generally prefer to just stick with that one. Again, I don't have any loyalty to brand one way or the other. Lyngso has such products. Any place that contractors go to regarding building materials would also have their own products and some of them may be proprietary to that vendor. But the low VOCs are volatile organic compounds. They're better for the environment to use those products. They are generally water-based. There are oil-based sealers out there too, but the oil-based is kind of old technology that I suspect is rapidly being invented out of existence or legislated out of existence because it's not so good for the environment. So fair enough. But no, that's the best I can give you. I wouldn't use the wet look. I'd use a conventional, I've heard invisible look. I've heard all kinds of different low sheen, I've heard. And the wet look's the only one that even gives a sheen. And on the stone, it's not a sheen. It just makes it look kind of constantly wet, like it got dark, but there's no glistening to it. So don't get your hopes shattered by thinking it's going to look all shiny and all that when you use wet look sealer. You won't, but it protects equally well. And you want to put a sealer. It's not the expensive part. Even if you hire somebody to do this, you could do it yourself. But clean the surface of the stones first. At the very minimum, a good washing and a good stiff brushing. There are cleaning products designed pre-sealer that the sealing companies make. Also not a bad idea. Many of them are environmentally friendly, as in they won't harm your plants or your lawn or whatever. Oh, before we sign off, this type of a wall, the rubble style, specifically the Napa wall rock, all the coloring you see, I don't think I have a broken one to show you the inside, but all the coloring you see in the patina and the moss and the lichen and the whatever, and these stones are an ugly gray inside if you break one. They're not brown at all. They have dirt, they have dust, they have patina, they have moss. And the back sides, the brown ugly sides, that's also not the actual stone. It's the stuff that's accumulated on the outside. If you back mortar or use mortar to install this wall, if you don't clean that off those stones and get it so that it's the raw stone, the mortar will have a much less successful bonding experience to the stone. It won't stick to it so well. Because what it's doing is sticking to the dirt and the dust and the whatever on the outside of the stone. It's not sticking to the stone at all. So a more lasting project would have you cleaning the stones as well as you can to allow the mortar to stick better. There are admixtures or chemicals or products, I should say, that you can add into the mortar. They're usually liquid, they usually look like milk, they come in big containers, that will make the mortar stick better to things. I'd recommend using it if you're gonna use the back mortar, again, to get the best bond you can to the stone. If you just use plain old mortar and just slap it all on here, you're gonna pat yourself in the back and walk away and have a cocktail or something admiring your work. But the reality is the mortar is not really holding the stones together nearly as well as it should be. It just looks like it. You never bang into it, you never have an earthquake, you never have a rambunctious child or 10 climbing all over everything, it'll probably stay put, but it's not actually bonded well at all. So, and you never know it until something happens. And then you realize, crap, golly, my whole wall's built that way. Something to consider.
And Tony, can you talk about the adhesive that you talked about earlier? Is there a brand of adhesive that you would use to seal the stones in between the layers?
To seal the stone in between, the adhesive products I was talking about, you mean?
The glue, yeah.
Yeah, the glue, I call it glue generically, it's not glue, it's not like Elmer's where it's liquid and comes out white. It's sold largely in caulking gun tubes, so you could buy any Home Depot, Lowe's, or whatever sources there are in other countries, for example. Similar product in a caulking tube, it's very pasty and thick, and it'll squeeze out and forms a bead. And all right, let me show you.
I think it's called paver bonding adhesive, right?
Yeah, Paver Bond was a brand many years ago. Lyngso used to sell Paver Bond. That was the actual brand. So I speak of Paver Bond generically now, that so many companies make their own versions of the very same products. And I don't even know if the Paver Bond company still exists. But generically speaking, yeah, some companies will call it, I've heard paver adhesive. I've heard concrete block adhesive, interlocking concrete pavers that are very popular for driveways and pathways and things. There are adhesives designed for adhering those products, same thing, it'll stick to stone as well. And it's essentially the same thing, they're all interchangeable. Oh, you could use those interlocking concrete blocks. Versalock is a company that Lyngso can get the products of, and they do the interlocking retaining wall blocks. They have smaller ones. They're not brick shaped. They're 6 inch by 8 inch, I think, by 2 inches thick. They're called Roman stone. They're the easiest things in the world to stack up. Boom, 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 you're done. One individual stone weighs maybe like 8 pounds. It's not a big deal. They're practical and super easy for a do-it-yourselfer to put together, and you would glue them together too. And for a raised bed or something, easy peasy, probably cheaper than using stone, the material costs. And I don't generally do them. I'm not being a snob or anything, but most of my clients really want something that looks custom made, as opposed to the kind of thing that any old person has gotten and can put in. Again, that sounds snobby, but it's just my clients, it's their home, it's their money, and I want to make sure that I give them a yard that they're going to be happy with and proud of for the rest of their lives. It doesn't matter what I like or not, but they're practical and those things work. You make fire pits out of them, they're great materials as far as being useful. And Lyngso also can aid a person who's interested in exploring the concrete manufactured stackable interlocking materials that are out there. There are numerous ones that you could use for stuff like this. Retaining wall blocks, they make caps that are designed to go on top of the retaining wall blocks. You can totally make it out of that. That is quick to put together. The labor is a whole lot less. Some of the retaining wall blocks are heavy, but you can get it done faster and probably for a better cost overall than some of these walls are concerned. The block, like I said, some of the wall blocks are heavy, they be 80 pounds. And if you're not up to lifting 80 pounds, then hire it out or pick a style of block that are designed that they don't weigh so much each individual block. Different companies have different processes for building walls like that. And some of them, the blocks are almost like hollow. So they're still concrete and whatnot, but they're not nearly as heavy as the solid concrete ones. And you fill those with drain rock afterwards. It stabilizes the wall and makes it solid and functional. And so you could do that too.
Alrighty, so we are a minute past our time here, but that's okay. Any closing remarks that you'd like to share with people, and then we'll just end the class there.
Well, thank you, Ken. Yes, everybody, wait down your 45 seconds. I have one more joke for you, and this isn't a walks into a bar joke, strangely enough. How about, you've heard this one before. How about a man comes home from work one day, and he is dog tired. He has worked so long, he just wants to be left alone. He tells his wife, if anybody calls for me, tell them I'm not home. So she says, okay, honey, I'll do that. Anyway, he goes to sleep. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the telephone rings and she rolls over and answers the phone on her side of the bed. And she says, yeah, he's here, and hangs up the phone. And the husband rolls over angry and saying, I told you to tell everybody who calls that I'm not here. So she turns back and looks at him and says, it wasn't for you. Thank you all for attending this shop. I hope you learned a few things. The question, quick, the question. What was the grasshopper's name? My first joke. Call in and you will not win a prize, but you can call in. But what was the grasshopper's name? Okay, next time on my next workshop, remember my name and visit my next workshop, and I'll be blown away if somebody will give me the grasshopper's name the next time. Meanwhile, everybody stay safe and have a happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate such a thing. But either way, it's a crazy world out there. Please take care of yourselves, and thank you.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Tony. Fabulous class yet again. And we'll see the audience for next time for another class. Take care, everyone.